Politan, thank you for joining us on Closing Arguments. Get ready, Monday it begins. The trial of the second half of the Doomsday Couple. But let's take a moment before we get to him and her and remember what this case is really about. 3 people who should be here today. Little JJ, who went missing. Grandpa was concerned, Grandma was concerned, and it started the whole search. Tylee, who lost her life, who was murdered. Her mother's already been held responsible. And Tammy, the devoted, faithful wife of Chad Daybell for all those years, raising all those children, doing everything right. She's gone too. Now, so who's left? Well, the Doomsday Couple. But they're kind of jammed up right now. Lori's been convicted of the murder. She's serving life in prison. She has a second trial that's getting ready to take place in Arizona involving the murder of her prior husband, Charles. And there's Chad. He's getting ready. Monday it all begins for him. And he's been implicated in the murder of Lori's 2 children, plus the murder of his faithful and loving wife, Tammy. Now, this was a steamy, hot love affair. Soon after Tammy was dead, they were together, running down to Hawaii, getting married, and spending that bag of money from the insurance, which was collected very quickly, by the way. I want you to take a listen to some folks who were kind of in the circle of Chad and Lori as they describe what this relationship was like.
Did Lori ever indicate to you whether or not she and Chad were engaged in an affair?
She would just share that they were intimate.
Was this while Charles was still alive?
Yes.
Was this while Tammy was still alive?
Yes.
Did Lori indicate whether or not she thought it was okay that they were engaging in intimate relations?
She did. She felt it was according to God's will.
And did she tell you, ever expand on why she believed it was according to God's will?
Yes. She explained that because they had been married in multiple lives and they had a mission together, that it was okay.
To me, it seemed like they were acting like a couple of teenagers that were first in love. And they were holding hands and sitting real close to each other. And Chad was rubbing her leg. And I just thought that was odd for your spouse just passed within a week and a half.
They were really loving with one another and affectionate.
Now, at this time, were you aware that he was still married to Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
Okay. Did the fact that he was married come up at all?
Yes.
All right. How did that happen?
I asked him I just asked him how his marriage was with the Tammy and if she was a good wife, and he said he had no complaints that she was a good wife, but he said her time was coming up, and that him and Lori were gonna go do the things that they had committed to do for God.
It was my understanding that her belief system had changed because of this group that she had recently become a part of.
He was trying to teach me about some of their beliefs, about the gathering of the 144,000 and then Satan having powers to push people out of their bodies, and then the spirits being stuck.
Lori and Chad were teaching that if you had been exalted in another world, another probation, then this time that you came to the earth, it didn't count for you because you had already proven yourself another probation. And she would often say, it doesn't count for me.
Do you recall who else you were told was dark?
So it was Charles, that was Brandon, her brother, not Alex, but another brother of hers, eventually her dad, and then Tylee, then Kay, then at the very end, JJ.
And during her trial, Lori Daybell, I mean, she really didn't fight the charges. I mean, she was almost happy to be there, it seemed. It was really strange, bizarre behavior by someone facing the rest of her life in prison accused of murdering her children. But she didn't really put up a fight. And something else, she never turned on Chad. Never. In fact, she got a little upset when her own attorney criticized Chad's books, his writings. I mean, she is still like in love with this guy, infatuated with this guy, and would never turn on him. She did speak, though, at the end of the case, at her sentencing, and no one will ever forget this statement.
I was told by Jesus that I needed to go back and complete things that I had covenanted or promised to do before I was born. This caused me a lot of distress because I knew heaven was my real home, and I only wanted to be there. I was free from pain, emotional and physical. But then I was shown how I would help my children and others in the future. So ultimately, I did agree to go back to my body. Jesus knows me, and Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn my children and Tammy. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen.
Bizarre. Let's bring in our special guest. Joining us in San Antonio, Texas, Lori Vallow's cousin and author of the book, I Walked Through the Fire to Get Here, Megan Connor, joining us. Excuse me. Megan, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start with the statement that we just heard from that moment in court, because she sort of sat throughout this trial, was not allowing her lawyers to fight this case. What did you hear in that statement, and what did you see when you saw Lori making that statement?
It just confirmed for me that she was still deluded into thinking that she hadn't done anything wrong. And I was infuriated with how disrespectful that statement was to her victims. And it was just very difficult to listen to. It was really just mind-blowing. I had so many emotions come up listening to that statement, and I still do, even now, so long afterwards, just realizing that she really is not herself.
Well, when you say she's not herself, you knew her before the rest of us knew her. Take us back to that time and then compare and explain to us when these changes happened and when you noticed these changes happening.
Well, when we were kids, she was a bright, bubbly, smart, funny, kid and teenager. She was the cheerleader. She would always command a room. She loved to sing. She loved to dance. And I think, those personality traits, some of them continued. But when we were young adults, I started to notice her sort of manipulative behaviors. I started to notice that she was more interested in getting what she wanted than she was in maintaining relationships with people. And it was difficult to watch those personality traits come out. When she decided to divorce Joe Ryan and she started making accusations against him, I didn't really know what to think of all of that. I was going through some difficult things myself, and that's really the last time that we were in close contact. I only saw her occasionally at family events after that. So I know that she was already down this kind of, as Judge Boyce said, religious rabbit hole. When I heard that she was attending the temple every day, I knew that she was enjoying Visions of Glory and other near-death experience books. So I knew that she was kind of going off in a direction that wasn't traditional for our faith. And I didn't really know Chad Daybell, never met him. But Lori was definitely already in a place at that point where she was manipulating people. She was she kind of had her little group of followers that she controlled and told what to do. So that part of it was not new when she met Chad.
So, you know, one way that she was portrayed, and I'm trying to understand this, the dynamics and the relationship, prosecutors seem to argue that Lori was the one sort of in charge of this couple. And what you're describing to me, someone who's able to manipulate people and get them to do what she wants, would you see that as consistent, that she could be in a relationship with a man and she's sort of in charge of that relationship?
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic, because I definitely saw, you know, since reading all the FOIA documents and every interview and every video, and sort of looking at and listening to the podcast that she was involved in, it's really interesting to see this dynamic where she was sort of covertly manipulating what she wanted, but at the same time using Chad's beliefs and his whole structure of theology as a justification for her kind of getting what she wanted, being in a position of power where she could tell other people what to do, and she could sort of play out her own narrative of how she wanted to, you know, get out of Charles's life and be free of the children. It was just really scary to watch those two dynamics come together and play together to end in tragedy.
Now, I think another relationship that will be front and center in the upcoming trial of Chad Daybell will be the relationship of Lori and her brother Alex. How well did you know Alex, and what were your thoughts of this brother-sister relationship of your cousins?
I knew Alex very well. We spent a lot of time together as young adults, and especially when he lived in San Antonio with his parents here in town. He spent some time living at my parents' house, and we did spend a lot of time together, so I felt like I knew him pretty well. I always knew him to be somebody who was sort of detached emotionally, wasn't really capable of forming emotional connections with people. He sort of played off everything serious as a joke, and so he didn't really face up to serious conversations. He never wanted to have confrontations. He would make jokes about those things. But as soon as I understood what had happened with him assaulting Joe Ryan and him going to prison for that assault, that sort of turned a corner in my mind about what kind of a person he was and what he was capable of.
Let's talk about that manipulation again by Lori in the dynamic between Alex and Lori, trying to figure out, again, who's calling the shots, because this all resulted in murders. I mean, horrific murders. Could you see a scenario where Lori is manipulating Alex? Are they playing off each other? Is he doing things perhaps to try to please her? How do you see that dynamic?
It seemed to me that Alex really wanted to be a protector of Lori, and I think he did definitely see himself that way. In talking with him a little bit after, you know, years after the assault on Joe Ryan, I think he really did believe that he was protecting Lori from somebody dangerous and protecting the children from somebody dangerous. And so I think he did view that as his role as her older brother. But also, when Lori wanted something to get done, it got done. She's always been kind of the person in the family who could dictate something and people would go along with it because it was good to have her approval. She was, you know, a person that was bright and funny and all those things. But if you did something she didn't like, she could be really vicious and unkind. And I think people in the family not wanting to see that side of her were a lot more willing to go along with whatever it was that she wanted to get done.
And how has the rest of her immediate family reacted to all of this? I mean, this is a huge case. Now it's a second trial. The names, the faces, the images, the stories are out there. How are they living the rest of their lives?
I think it's been devastating for everyone. Somebody who interviewed me at one point commented that that murderers kill their families too, and I think that's absolutely true. Our family will never be the same after this. I know everybody's kind of handling it in their own way. I think some healthier than others. I just think it's a tragedy that everybody who knew Lori and loved Lori, knew the kids and loved the kids, are just ripped apart by this. And it's not something any of us will ever truly recover from. None of us will ever be the same after this.
Megan Connor, appreciate your time tonight. Again, the book, I Walked Through the Fire to Get Here. We appreciate your insight. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.